I'm Chloe. I am 33 and I have cerebral palsy. What brought me to advocacy is a long story, which hopefully I'm going to tell you, and hopefully it'll help you to be better advocates. That's my plan. But it might also make you laugh and make you cry, so I'm sorry in advance for that. So I was born with quadriplegic dystonic cerebral palsy, which means that there was a lack of oxygen to the brain, which affects all four of my limbs. So it means I can't walk or stand or sit or wait there independently. So I'm completely reliant on a wheelchair to move around and on other people to help me with everything everybody does every day themselves, both personally, socially, with my work. I've got brains, but I haven't got a body that goes with them, so it's just finding workarounds with that. But I was lucky because I was born into a very supportive family, so they've always wanted me to be treated exactly the same as everybody else. Um, so it was never an issue that I wasn't going to school or I wasn't going to college, university, work. You know, I did what everybody else had to do, maybe in a slightly different way sometimes, but still, you know, it was important to them that I was treated equally to the rest of the world, and that meant dealing with the shitty bits as well as the nice ones. It's just a bit unfortunate that I had more shitty bits than most, but that's a good thing because that's why I'm here. Basically, I think the first things that made me want to be like not necessarily an advocate, but more forthcoming about what's right and what's wrong for somebody like me was because when I was at high school, I got quite severely verbally abused by a welfare assistant that was supposed to be supporting me both emotionally and physically to get through my education. And it was very awkward because prior to that, I'd done some mainstream high school, primary school with her. And when I was in primary school, she didn't abuse me. But when we moved to high school, for some reason it changed. So when I was trying to report that things weren't right, everybody thought it was because I was struggling with the transition from primary to high and not because this woman had changed her attitude. Um, and it took me probably a school year, maybe a school year and a bit, to convince my parents that there was actually something going on that they needed to deal with and that I wasn't being an awkward teenager who didn't want to go to school. Um, and that was only because a supply teacher happened to be friends with my mum and she witnessed me being abused in a corridor and then happened to subsequently go for coffee with my mum who said, I don't really know what to do because I'm not really sure what's going on. And she said, I'm glad you said it because I was wondering whether to tell you about what I'd witnessed. So after that, I got back home from school that day and my mum said, be brutally honest with me, is she abusing you? And I just broke down and said, why does no one believe me? So then it probably took about another school year for the school to convince my parents to convince the school that there was something going on and it was this woman and that she needed removing. And it actually got to a point because she was very clever at covering up the tracks. So every time there could potentially have been evidence that she was in the wrong, she would do something to cover it up so that the school thought it was me or somebody else. And so it got to a point where I came in from school, I think it was one Friday evening, and I was literally hyperventilating with tears. It took my mum and dad 2 hours in the year to calm me down and find out what had gone on that had made me so upset. And my dad was that angry and fed up with it that he rang the school and said, if you don't take this woman off my daughter's case by Monday, I'm not sending her in. She won't be coming back until you do, because this is serious and it needs dealing with. And because their numbers had been threatened, the school then went, shit, we better do something about this. And they did sort it out. My primary school was a very good support. So they that was a special school. So they sent staff for me, and like made sure I was all right in the interim. And eventually I did get a good team of staff employed by the high school. But one of the things I've always felt since that is that in that time, advocacy didn't exist, or at least if it did, no one was aware of it. So I didn't have an advocate at all. Obviously, I wasn't in a situation to use my own voice because the more I did, the more abuse I got. So my friends actually were trying to advocate for me, but they were 11, 12 as well. So, their parents and teachers were saying, well, Chloe isn't our responsibility. You need to tell Chloe to tell the parents. My parents thought I was being an awkward hormonal child because school was all new. It was mainstream, and I'd only been used to mainstream part-time previously. So they knew there was emotional stuff I would be going through anyway. Then they never imagined that that was what it was, and they've probably spent most of their lives since apologising to me because it's still affects my life today. It affects how easily I can trust people. I worry because obviously I'm still reliant on care staff, and I worry all the time about the ones I've got leaving and who's going to come next and what impact that has on me and everybody else around me. And I believe that if I hadn't gone through that, yeah, I probably still would have a little bit, but it's all intensified because I wasn't treated correctly. So, and then since growing up and learning about advocacy and what it's there for, I'm like, well, I don't want anybody else to go through what I've gone through. So now I'm going to be their voice because I can't change what's happened to me. But it was hell on earth and sometimes still is. And I don't want any child or adult to be in that situation because it's awful. Also, when I went to college after school, I went back to special college because at the time we thought that might benefit me from an emotional point of view. It didn't. One, because I'd spent lots of time with able-bodied people, so I was used to a whole different world. And secondly, the care and support there was really bad. And so that was institutional abuse then. And I didn't have a voice there either because nobody believed me. And if they did, the attitude was, well, it's tough because you're disabled and this is what you've got to deal with. Well, I would have had somebody to listen and take me seriously rather than everybody thinking, oh, this is an awkward 11-year-old and we're just going to agree with her and nod our heads and then carry on. If I could have actually gone to somebody and said, she's been horrible to me and nobody believed me, what kind of effect would that have had? And it might have been dealt with a lot quicker, which then would have meant that I wouldn't have had to wait 3 years to feel like I was getting the right education at high school. We talk about it all the time, don't we, in our advocacy work, that no matter what a partner person says to us, we have to believe them, or at least be seen to believe them when we're talking to them, because if you don't, then it breaks the trust. And once you've broken trust, you're going nowhere. Even if it's really silly, like they're telling you they want to fly to the moon, still believe them. If you can't advocate for yourself, then you're not going to be able to do it for anybody else. So you need to try and learn to do that before you can think about, any kind of relationship with anybody really. So, but it's hard because we all say, I know that you've said it to me as well, so does Patsy, we're a load of advocates, probably everybody on this call will say the same thing. And everybody thinks we're amazing, how we help people. We go through a crisis. There is no way we're putting our own voice forward, because you can't. And it's ridiculous, because I don't know why it works like that, but it does. I have to have advocates in my daily life to get me through my stuff. My mum's on the phone to my social worker while I'm on the phone to other people's, because I can't deal with my stuff, but I can deal with theirs. And so it's really hard to get somebody to that point. And sometimes I don't think we ever will, but it's more about encouraging independence. So even if they can dial the phone number and you can do the speaking, for example, then get them to dial the phone number for you. It's the little things. I think advocating for other people, sometimes you within a partnership you see things and you think, actually I need to do more of what I'm preaching here because it works. Um, and also the situation I'm in with my life, I have to have a voice and I have to maintain a voice. Otherwise, I end up with no control whatsoever. All the little decisions that everybody makes every day without even thinking about it, they could so easily be taken away from me. So I've had to work to build up the skill to say no. It might be a small thing, it might be the difference between one or two sugars in your tea. But it's still important because it's still my life and my autonomy. Um, so you have to kind of get that balance between, fair enough, you have to consider other people because you're being cared for by them, but at the same time, it's not just all about them. It's about the person in the middle as well. So being person centered, which in my opinion the system does not do. It says it does it, but it doesn't do it. And that's what we as advocates need to remember all the time, because actually I think in some situations the definition of person centered is very, very wrong. And actually when you strip it down, it's service centered. They're just making it look like it's person centered so that they get away with it. Treat the person you're supporting like a person. Don't We all do it, even I do it, and I've got disabilities myself. Don't go in with this preconceived idea of, oh, this person's in this situation, so they're probably going to want that, or they're probably not going to be able to do this, or they've probably not got their support around them. Forget all that. Just go in and sit down with them, talk to them, and figure out what's going on for them. And only when you've done that can you then figure out what they want you to do. The other professionals in the system are so, oh, I'm coming with this form and I'm aiming to tick these boxes. So that is what everyone who gets referred from a service user point of view will expect. First off, we are just another person that's doing exactly the same thing. But so we need to go in like, we're not that person, we're not going to do that. I always say to my partners, I hate forms, I hate boxes, I hate assessments. I'm not doing any of it. I don't even do the feedback in that kind of format. I just talk to them, and anything I think sounds like feedback goes in the feedback box. It's not give me feedback on the survey quiz, because that isn't what we're there for. We're there to make sure that they've got a voice, and they don't want to use their voice ticking boxes. They want to use their voice to tell and share their story and tell us what they're struggling with. Um, and some people will go on to help us fight the system. So we need to, in a positive way, we need to use them instead of treating them like a thing that's going through a system and then comes out the other end and we never see again. No one wants that. That's horrible. You might as well work in a meat factory. Just don't worry about anything. Just treat them like you would want to be treated yourself, or like you treat your relatives, however you want to see it. But they're people. Forget the labels. But if we're working towards getting people to advocate for themselves, I would rather spend 10 years solid with one advocacy partner, and at the end of that 10 years, then be able to turn around and say, I don't need you anymore, go away, than spend, I don't know, a couple of months over a series of spells, dealing with an issue. They go off my caseload, 6 months later, they're back with another issue. We're not getting to the root of the problem, because the root of the problem is probably that for some reason that we've not yet found, they're struggling to be believed, be heard, find a way to physically voice their opinion in the first place. So we need to be focused on that and not just doing what it says on the form, because there's a lot more to it than, like, I've just had a service user, and the reason he was referred to me was because he's struggling to communicate with his housing provider because of lots of things going wrong. The system doesn't understand him, so he keeps getting aggressive, and then communication will break down. So they referred him to me and said, can you be the go-between? Because the staff on the operating system won't speak to him because he's aggressive to them. And straight away, I said to him and I said to them, why is he being aggressive? And they were like, well, he's an idiot. I said, no, he's not an idiot. He's aggressive because he's anxious, because you're not understanding his needs. And he's trying to tell you and you're not listening, because the system that you have doesn't fit with his brain. He doesn't understand why it has to work that way. So instead of just fobbing him off, find a different way for it to work, because he doesn't mean to be aggressive. He gets upset with me on the phone when I tell him that people don't want to speak to him because he's getting angry with them. So if he was an idiot, he wouldn't get upset about it. He worries himself about the way he's treating people, because he loses control, because he doesn't understand what's going on around him. So it's my job isn't just about ringing them every time there's an issue. My job is saying, why can he not communicate with you? What can we do so that he can, so that I don't need to be here on the phone every 10 minutes because he daren't speak to you in case you put the phone down on him because you think he's an aggressive idiot?
And you tap them there into that idea that advocates need to change the system.
Yeah, I think a lot in the system needs changing, and I think unfortunately that's what the fight is for many advocates, if not for the advocacy partners for ourselves, because Nobody gets what we do. We go into meetings and everybody thinks we're like instead of a social worker and asks us to make an assessment and says, can you please make this person sign this piece of paper or whatever. So we're constantly fighting against the system to say, we're here, this is what we do, people need voices. So not only are we fighting for our partners, we're constantly fighting for ourselves and for the profession. Because how many people do you go up to in the street, ask you what your job is, and you say I'm an advocate, and they go, "What? What does that mean? Are you in the court?" No. So yeah, it's hard work, and I get that it's really hard, and sometimes you have these situations and you just haven't got the foggiest idea what to do. But I know it sounds weird, and nowhere else in the system would we say it is okay. But I will admit to my partners, and I will say, I haven't a clue what we do about that situation, but I'm going to go and find out and come back to you. And if I can't, then I'll find somebody who can, instead of, oh, how about we do this instead because we can't deal with that, which is what the rest of the world, when they haven't got a clue about something, they'll refer you to somewhere else because they're like, we don't quite know how to deal with this, and we don't admit it because it makes us look bad as a service. No, it doesn't. It makes us look like people. We can't all do everything all of the time. And nobody disabled, able-bodied, colour, creed should expect that everything's going to be perfect 100% of the time. As long as it's perfect about 50% of the time, then it works. Great advocacy. I think advocacy shouldn't be glorified. Great advocacy is sat round a table with a cup of tea, listening to someone I talk about either how shit or how brilliant their life is. That's it. Almost part of me thinks, there's a problem because advocates are here in the first place, because you'd think people would have other support networks that could assist them to do that within their professional team or within their family, but they don't, and that's where the system falls down. Everybody says, oh, you're an advocate and it's amazing. Actually, no, I'm just having a cup of tea with someone and making sure they're okay, which is what you hear that we should be doing in the news, particularly at the moment, all the time. But for some reason, probably to do with funding, because most things are, that we have to have labels and we have to be, oh, you're doing this job, not that one. It's like, no, with people, like, I'm talking to you now, as far as I know, you're able-bodied. But if you had an issue that I needed to help you with, of course I would help you with it, because, that's human nature. It's not about who does what. Who says social workers can't advocate? Who says advocates can't get involved in what's going on with social services for that person? There's too many boxes and don't do that, do this. And the poor advocacy partners don't know who to talk to about what, because there's that much going on. They don't know which people are going to believe them, which people are going to trust them, which people are going to act on what they say, because nobody just talks to them. They're a thing that somebody's got to come to work, deal with, and then go home and forget about. That's not a person. I wouldn't even do that to my dog. So why would I do it to a person that I'm paid to provide a service to? I think to always assume that people can communicate, because generally if people have a different form of communication to what is perceived as the norm, the system perceive it as they can't communicate. Actually, they can, and they probably, or you just haven't understood their language or their method of communication yet. I don't know anyone that doesn't communicate at all. And even my dog communicates with me with her eyes. Um, so to say a person can't communicate is ridiculous. Yeah, whatever they do to communicate might be weird, and it might not be what we perceive as communication, but when you dig deeper, it is. And even if it takes you years to find what that method is before you actually solve the issue, then do it, because it's worth it. Because the change in that person afterwards is it feels so rewarding that you can look and go, I did that. And if I hadn't come in and found this, then this person would probably still be in a situation that they're really fed up with. Just like I've said before, really, treat the person like a person. Don't assume anything. Um, I've heard the phrase before, assume makes an ass out of me. Remember it all the time. You will still do it because everybody does it naturally, and it's really annoying because I don't want to do it either, but I do it. But definitely don't assume anything, and just always, always, always listen and understand, even if in that moment it sounds like it's a pile of gobbledygook to you. Try and understand it, and even if you can't, put it across to somebody else anyway, because clearly that's what that person wants you to do. I think all advocates are amazing, and I hate blowing my own trumpet. So I just want to say, you all doing a fantastic job, and no matter how much anybody tells you that you're not, as long as your service users are happy with what you're doing an amazing job. Forget the system, forget everybody else around you. It's you and that service user that are important. If there's an issue with that, then by all means go and rant to your line manager or whoever it is you talk to. But don't panic about funding, about what the system says you can and can't do, because at the end of the day, your service users, partners, people, whatever we want to call them, they don't care about that as long as somebody is listening. And as long as you can tell the commissioners, look, people have listened to me and they're happy with what I'm doing, that's it. That's all it takes. So don't stress.